제좀 못sor는 형님 좀에 뭐는 심보는 게 박그르다는 감산도 시험을 dostum batıcıcanla gifşarım çarı. Today we are going to have a detailed discussion about the profound Analects. Actually, the Analects, this should prove to be very useful for many of us. Indeed, it should be extremely beneficial and advantageous. So, taking this valuable opportunity for everyone to thoroughly study and understand it together, I think is really quite necessary and important. In the past, maybe many people knew about the Analects, that it's very famous and widely known. But as for all the content contained inside, perhaps many people have never studied it. No matter what ethnicity you are, after learning it, it should be helpful in how to conduct yourself, handle affairs, and interact with others in all aspects. It should be extremely helpful for oneself. In Buddhism, we have many key instructions regarding personal character and conduct. Actually, many of these fundamental principles are thoroughly discussed here as well, providing valuable insights. In certain respects, perhaps our Mahayana mind training methods, for instance, are basically the same in terms of their fundamental and essential key instructions. So this time, as we all study together, of course, when it comes to the process of studying, a few individuals might initially start out feeling curious, but then gradually lose their interest along the way. But some people remain very dedicated throughout the entire process. No matter what happens in the process, they have never given up on their studies and have never fallen behind. Some individuals, due to life and work reasons, may occasionally fall behind, but overall they still very much persist. So now, let us delve into a discussion about the profound and influential Analects. This Analects, specifically the on-learning chapter that we're discussing now, today we are covering chapter 12. Chapter 12 primarily discusses the concepts of ritual and harmony, specifically focusing on these significant aspects. First, it begins with Yuzi said. Yuzi, as mentioned earlier, was one of Confucius's prominent disciples. At that time, he said the following: "In the application of ritual, harmony is most precious." This was truly the inherent beauty of the way of the ancient kings. Indeed, here he refers to the profound ritual concept we are discussing. And in terms of the application of ritual, in fact, to create and establish harmony, to form and maintain peace, is most precious and valuable because of this particular way of ritual propriety and ceremonial conduct was actually practiced and diligently applied by ancient sages such as Yao, Shun, and Yu, as well as many other revered ancient kings. They all consistently relied upon such profound rituals to effectively govern their respective countries and maintain societal harmony. So for every single truly individual nation, or for every ruler, this is indeed the most admirable and exemplary kind of conduct that can be observed. This is primarily because some individuals, when they are in the process of interpreting what is commonly referred to as the ritual, often approach it with a particular perspective. Explain it as a profound and multifaceted form of art. Since the comprehensive scope of art can be quite broad and encompass numerous aspects, whether we talk about established rules, intricate rituals, or certain specific codes of conduct, in fact, these are also either a special kind of a physical art form or a very special kind of art in language. And even in our minds, it also has a certain degree of quality, like the reverence and respect we often talk about. This too is a unique form of art. So generally speaking, for a gentleman, the application of ritual, such as the distinctions between elders and juniors, superiors and inferiors among people, even though we all appear to be human beings, in reality, each person's true identity, each person's actual status, every individual person's rules and principles are completely different and distinct from one another. Like in the animal kingdom, as long as they can eat grass and consume food and water, that is already sufficient for them. But we humans have a rich culture and we possess ancient traditions. So the practice of ritual is actually about peace, or you could truly say harmony. In terms of our own bodies and inherent language, we have established rules and proper etiquette. And from the perspective of our hearts, we all share a culture of harmonious coexistence. This is truly the most incredibly precious thing in the entire world. Because of this understanding, all of these ancient sage kings and rulers throughout history, they also utilized ritual propriety and established rules and regulations, which are essentially what we now call modern laws and various religious precepts and commandments, are also forms of ritual, also a kind of etiquette. They use these to govern the country, use these principles to begin governing their own societies effectively. Both in small matters and in great, one may follow it, yet there are times when it will not work. Here he explains that whether you handle major affairs or minor everyday matters, this fundamental ritual propriety absolutely cannot be separated or abandoned. Etiquette is indispensable. If some people think that these principles are not necessary, then the things they attempt to accomplish will not be successful. Yet there are times when it will not work. You can also explain and justify in this way. There are also ways to explain it like this. For some things, no matter how truly big or incredibly small they may be, in actual fact, ritual is something that you absolutely cannot do without. If something cannot be done, it is about knowing harmony and seeking harmony. But if it is not properly regulated by ritual, it still cannot be fully accomplished. This essentially means that if matters are not carried out according to established ritual, then at this point it is merely a superficial pursuit of harmony for the sake of harmony. It is harmony just for the sake of being harmonious. It is not truly a culture with rules and rituals. It is just for the sake of everyone cooperating together. If everyone just gets along on the surface like this, then it is not being regulated by ritual. And in this case, things will not work out either. Nowadays, many people do not truly have the proper etiquette in relationships, whether it's between elders and juniors, or between teachers and students, or between fathers and sons, or between masters and disciples. There is a lack of ritual etiquette in these kinds of relationships. It's just a matter of getting along with each other in a certain setting. It's merely mutual cooperation. For example, between teachers and students, according to traditional culture, students do have the identity of being students. Teachers have the identity of being teachers, but students toward teachers should always have a sense of respect. In the Sigalovada Sutta, it is said that there are 5 duties between parents and children, and 5 duties between husband and wife, and also 5 duties between master and disciple. When discussing the 6 directions, each side mutually has 5 principles, 5 fundamental guidelines to follow. However, if we constantly and blindly emphasize so-called democracy, so-called equality, and so-called treating everything with complete impartiality and uniformity, then in such circumstances and situations like this, then we might all have a certain shared culture, or a certain concept in mind. Even in the way we address each other nowadays, for example, in Tibetan, there are specific terms of address for teachers, and there are honorifics for parents, ways of addressing people with respectful language. But if we don't have this, just like in some cultures nowadays, when teachers write to students, they also use dear, and students address teachers in pretty much the same way. If that's the way people address each other, then perhaps under that particular culture, there is a genuine sense of equality. But maybe there isn't true equality in reality. Because in certain areas of knowledge and experience, there are truly many things to learn. True equality is actually very difficult to achieve. Therefore, it is particularly important and essential that we possess this kind of ritual cultural foundation and understanding. If you don't have this type of ceremonial propriety, or in other words, these kinds of fundamental rules and guidelines, then in reality, humans and animals would have no significant, meaningful difference between them. This is also precisely what was said in the ancient Book of Rites in the past. The actions of sages were to use propriety to teach people. As wise sages, they consistently taught others through their profound propriety. It is proper etiquette that truly distinguishes humans from animals. Humans possess a sense of propriety, but as for the animals, they do not. They don't have a culture of propriety. That is truly the difference between them. Perhaps everyone has already heard this story before. There was once a powerful and respected king of the ancient state of Qi named Duke Jing of Qi. This powerful king on one occasion became quite intoxicated while leisurely drinking some fine wine. After he got quite drunk, he completely took off all his clothes and even his hat. Then, with a determined expression, he started beating the drum, creating a powerful rhythm. He ran around completely naked and openly exposed in public without any clothing. While doing this, he uttered these words. He asked his attentive attendants who were gathered below him. He said, as a powerful king, "Is it truly appropriate for me to behave in this manner purely for entertainment?" At that time, he asked his subordinates, and these subordinates, in order to please him, said, "Ah, this is great. A king is just like any other ordinary person, possessing flesh and a physical body, so there's absolutely nothing wrong with this particular situation in any way. It's especially wonderful, very good." Then the king thought that his own behavior was indeed very good and commendable. He immediately summoned one of his trusted ministers, a very famous one named Yanzi. not the Yanzi from Confucius' disciples. He asked Yanzi to come over, inviting him to join in the festivities and enjoy themselves together. At that particular time, Yanzi was still formally dressed in his very official and ceremonial court attire, and he proceeded to arrive at the scene, presenting himself as requested. When he arrived and saw the situation, he saw that the king had completely abandoned all decorum and was behaving like this in front of others. At this moment, the king asked Yanzi, "Is it reasonable to act like this?" He thought etiquette didn't matter, and Yanzi could do the same. He invited, "Let's enjoy ourselves." Yanzi told him, "Your Majesty, you are mistaken. What you are doing is not right. If there is no etiquette, some of the officials here have strength and wisdom far greater than mine, and far greater than yours as well. If there is no etiquette, then they have no reason to show you respect or to make you king. If there is no etiquette, you also have no reason to treat them as your own subordinates. There is no need to consider them your subordinates." He said, "The Book of Rights already clearly states, if there is no proper etiquette, there is truly no discernible difference between people and animals, between humans and all other living things." Even though he was his superior, he still gave him a stern lesson. Sometimes this is very necessary. In some aspects of our current culture, as long as someone is in a higher position, people just blindly flatter them. Wow, whatever you do is just wonderful. It's especially great, especially impressive. Wow, this is really quite good. But this particular kind of thing is of no real benefit to the ruler either. Then, when he said this at that very moment, he said, "What you are currently doing, your actions, are truly and utterly unreasonable." The king then responded, "But my own actions, the things I do, the people who surround me, they all consistently say that what I am doing is good and commendable. Should I in this situation kill them? They're the ones who told me to do this." Then Yanzi told him, "Your Majesty, you absolutely shouldn't kill them. Actually, right at this very moment, if the ruler's own personal conduct is truly proper and exemplary, then those below him simply cannot be swayed or led astray." It was only at this crucial point that the king fully understood. So what we profoundly call propriety here, in certain situations, is indeed truly very, very necessary. Nowadays, people think that so-called propriety is just an outdated idea, that it's a rigid behavior, and that it doesn't really mean much to us. Now, we are truly open and can do whatever we want, doing whatever we think of, and that's what makes us happy. At certain times, perhaps that might be true, but sometimes if circumstances continue in this manner, the eventual outcome may not be very good at all. So now when it comes to the essence of wisdom in traditional culture, we should carefully compare it with the current popular attitudes and behaviors of people. We're not saying that absolutely everything from ancient times was truly wonderful and inherently good. That's not necessarily the case. Times have changed, and now, in today's world, many things may no longer be applicable or usable. There's no need to insist on using them. But there is some knowledge that we can't ignore. If we do take it into consideration, it might bring significant changes and benefits to our words, our actions, and our behavior, respectively. That officially concludes our discussion for Chapter 12. Next, we will proceed to talk about Chapter 13. 怎么讲的呢？Yesterday, there were really some important matters at the academy that we kept discussing and meeting about until 2 or 3 in the morning. So I didn't get much sleep last night. I might be a bit out of it today, maybe even talking in my sleep. If that happens, someone next to me should wake me up. Just sprinkle a little water on me. That will work, okay? Or chant Om Sambara Sambara, something like that. Next is Yuzi said. Earlier, it was also Yuzi, right? This is also something that Yuzi himself said too. If your word is close to what is right, it can be kept. If your reverence is close to propriety, one will avoid disgrace. If one does not lose the affection of those close to him, he can truly be regarded as a model. Here, there are three distinct levels of meaning. What this means is that trustworthiness must conform to righteousness and ritual propriety. Trust refers to credibility and reliability, right? Or whether we're talking about creditworthiness or personal promises and commitments, all of these fundamental elements must absolutely conform to and align with true and the actual prevailing current circumstances of the situation. Whatever you have promised and committed to must necessarily be suitable and appropriate for your fundamental principles. If that's truly the case, then your words can be absolutely trusted and completely relied upon. The promises you genuinely make can indeed be fully and completely fulfilled. Your credibility, therefore, perfectly matches and aligns with reality. It's not merely that you make a promise or simply agree to something, but when it actually comes time to truly carry it out, it seems that your initial promise and the actual current situation are quite different, are very far apart from each other. Many young people nowadays, when they are faced with anything at all, unfortunately do not take the time to properly observe or carefully analyze it first, and then immediately make a promise. But in the end, during the process of putting it into practice, they regret it themselves. This happens in many aspects of our daily lives as well. Why is it that in the end you can't fulfill your promise? In fact, it may be that from the very beginning, sometimes you lack social experience, and sometimes, quite often, you don't have very detailed or comprehensive wisdom. Because of these significant reasons, you ultimately end up deeply regretting it, truly. Things like this often happen in daily life. So here, what you promise yourself must be in line with reality and reason. You need to have this kind of flexibility. It's not that just because you made a promise, you have to stubbornly stick to it, clinging to it, like waiting by a tree for a rabbit. There is a fascinating story recounted in some very old commentaries, which vividly tells of a man who meticulously arranged to meet a particular woman under a bridge. However, the woman didn't show up as expected, so the man kept waiting patiently there still. When it got to midnight, a significant flood occurred. But when the flood came, maybe the man was a bit foolish. He kept thinking, I can't leave this place. I made a promise. Then he continuously held on to and embraced the bridge pillar, and finally he was already drowned to death. This is also a kind of historical lesson, right? It tells us that when we are doing anything in life, we should sometimes have a certain flexibility. But this kind of flexibility should also, as much as possible, not go against our own promises. A promise is worth 1,000 pieces of gold. We often say, a gentleman's word cannot be chased by 4 horses. Generally speaking, people with wisdom and intelligence regarding what they have promised and committed to, they will not go against their own promises. In Tibetan regions, there is a particular saying called that the promise he makes on the day he is born remains firm even when he leaves this world. There is such a saying. So, first and foremost, this is mainly and primarily about the crucial concept of trustworthiness. This is how trustworthiness is explained. Next, the second aspect. Respectful conduct in accordance with propriety keeps one far from disgrace. Our sense of reverence, perhaps respect and reverence are somewhat different. When it comes to this kind of reverent behavior, it actually also needs to conform to the proper etiquette. If we show extreme reverence to everyone, even bowing to all, then that's not really appropriate. In Tibet, we have a term called lapdog. A lapdog wags its tail very happily and licks the feet of every single person it encounters. There is no justifiable need or valid reason for such an action. Generally speaking, when individuals genuinely demonstrate reverence, it should originate from a profound and sincere heart, filled with deep respect and genuine honor. If you truly, like the Bodhisattva, never disparaging, show reverence to all sentient beings as the Buddha did, then it's fine to be reverent to everyone, and you don't need to follow any particular etiquette. But if that's not the case, then you need to discern who is truly worthy of your reverence and who is not worthy of your reverence. So you must have a set of principles. If your reverence lacks principles, in fact, it also undermines the very idea of etiquette. Nowadays, people throughout the entire world have no real established rules, and whatever each individual person thinks in their own mind has already become the accepted rule. Some young people today tend to think in a very simplistic way. A couple of days ago, should be this June, right? There were 4 young girls all together in one place who went out together to eat hotpot. Finally, when paying the bill and handling the money matters, the four of them started arguing and quarreling. After they began arguing, it seemed like they had been classmates since high school together. Later, one of them found a job, while the others seemed to be elsewhere. But the one who eventually found a job, her salary wasn't very high, yet she insisted on paying, over 1,000 yen nonetheless. The others wouldn't agree to it. In the end, maybe because they had been drinking, on the one hand, they started to get really emotional about this matter, and the four of them fought over it. After one person paid the bill, the others couldn't accept it. One of them slit her wrists and died on the spot. Then another one also couldn't get over it, and immediately went out and jumped into a nearby river or a pool to commit suicide. So, in just a very short period of time, all this unfortunate event happened just over the simple act of paying the bill. In the West, many people split the bill evenly. That might be a better way. Otherwise, everyone is generous, but no one wants to be generous. That's really not a good thing. Sometimes when we conduct ourselves or handle things, especially when we go out, it's best to first. Among us Tibetans, there's a saying, "It is often said that friendships should indeed be close, but accounts should always be clear." That is how the well-known saying goes. So at first it seems like everyone has a generous heart and is willing to be open-handed. But in the end, people may feel dissatisfied inside. That's not good either. Actually, this is a kind of etiquette. Whether it's about finances or about relationships between people, in many aspects there are certain rules. If these rules aren't established from the start, and things are often handled in a rather muddled way at first, then in the end, relationships between people will also, whether it's about significant financial matters or complex interpersonal relationships, people will inevitably start to lose trust in each other. That's truly not good at all, and it can have serious and far-reaching consequences for society as a whole. Actually, showing respect is truly very necessary, but when it comes to respect, you should show it to your teachers, to your parents, and to all of these people. Some people say, oh, respect isn't necessary, but that's actually not the case. When a truly high-ranking and esteemed leader arrives, for example, when His Holiness visited various Western countries, some people would genuinely say, we're all equal. So in that particular case, is showing due respect absolutely necessary or not? Later, His Holiness said, well then, I think it was in the United States at the time. If that's the case, when President Clinton comes, try kicking him with your foot and see what happens. Will the security guards around him arrest you or not? His Holiness was joking. Sometimes, even though we emphasize equality, there are still times when true equality isn't possible, because in terms of wisdom, status, and even in terms of blessings and all good things, it's actually quite difficult for everyone to be completely equal. But we do indeed need a certain sense of propriety. If this propriety is taken too far, if we show respect for absolutely everything, I think that can be a bit rigid as well.
In ancient times, people probably didn't have as many things to deal with in their daily lives. There were a lot more rules and etiquette between people. In our Tibetan region, sometimes there are especially many important rules and customs. For example, when pouring tea for someone with a ladle, it is customary to follow certain traditions. You can't lift it up. There are a lot of such rules. And when placing a cushion for someone, there are rules about which direction the cushion should face. Ancient people made things complicated. We find these customs hard to accept. These things don't necessarily have much significance. But for some things, people do need to have a sense of reverence. We humans are not like animals. Animals, after all, don't really have culture. As long as they have sufficient food, that is certainly quite enough for them, but people are quite different indeed. What appears to be etiquette between people on the surface, or established rules, is actually something that is deeply instilled into your very blood, truly making you quite different from all others. If you belong to a particular ethnic group, each nation and ethnic group has its own unique cultural genetic code that has been continuously instilled and deeply implanted throughout history. Therefore, we cannot simply take the imagination of modern people to completely deny these things. That wouldn't be reasonable either. On the other hand, if we accept everything without question, that might also be unnecessary. And there's really no need for that either. So when we study the Analects, it's not about applying everything directly to our modern lives. Nor is it true that all ancient culture is unnecessary, or that it's all outdated thinking. So there's no need to abandon it entirely either. Therefore, if reverence and respect properly conform to ritual propriety and ceremonial principles, then one can stay far away from many shameful, disgraceful things. If you don't do this and show respect to everyone indiscriminately, bowing to everyone you meet, then that in fact is a very shameful thing. Now the third point, because he does not lose his kin, he can be regarded as a model. There are many different ways to interpret this. Some explanations say that yin here means kindness or grace, since it contains the heart, a radical at the bottom. Because for someone who possesses kindness, he does not lose the kind of genuine, heartfelt love that makes him truly approachable. In this particular case, you can certainly respect and look up to him, because when there is kindness, a profound and inherent goodness, there is certainly mutual affection between people, and with such affection, we can continue to reliably depend on each other and consistently keep showing mutual respect and sincere admiration for one another. This is one way to interpret it. There is another interpretation. This yin also inherently carries the significant meaning of marriage. When it refers to marriage, to getting married, in reality, there is actually a kind of loving relationship and affection within this concept. So when you have this love, if you don't lose this kind of approachable and intimate love, then you can also extend it to your race and ethnicity as well, and to your immediate kin and extended clan as well. Because through such a significant and meaningful marriage, through this profound and enduring kind of relationship, your own unique culture, your distinct ethnicity, and your established caste will be further strengthened and deeply intertwined with others. All these can be continuously passed down. It also has this meaning. There is yet another important meaning of yin, which is reliance or dependence upon something. By relying on and not losing these people who can be approached and trusted, by depending on and not losing this kind of approachable and trustworthy people, you can actually pass down and transmit your own cultural heritage to future generations. And you can also become worthy of people's respect, admiration, and reverence. It makes you worthy of reverence. In other words, relying on different people, whether they are people who have shown you kindness or people with whom you have emotional ties, or others whom you absolutely need to depend on, all these crucial people. In fact, you simply cannot afford to lose the vital connections and important relationships that exist between these individuals. These are inseparable bonds, inseparable relationships. And in this way, you can pass down and transmit both your personal cultural heritage and spiritual values. All of these important elements can be inherited and continued for future generations. Actually, this is also indeed a very distinct kind of culture. Between people themselves in general, we still need a form of communication. In fact, this is even more true in today's society. I think whether we are truly Buddhists or not, or non-Buddhists, what kind of world are we living in now? It's a world of cooperation. It's completely different from the past. Now, when we talk about where we live, most of us live in cities, and all these people live in high-rise buildings. That's why they're called concrete bugs. Little tiny bugs inside reinforced concrete structures, groups and groups just like ants. So this also requires cooperation. You see, we need property management and so many other things. Whenever we go out to do anything, whether it's business or studying Buddhism, many things require a certain spirit of teamwork, a collective spirit. So if a person can't manage their relationships with others, can't handle relationships with those above them, can't handle equal relationships, and consequently cannot truly effectively handle their relationships with those who are below them in this particular world. Unless they're like a Pratyeka Buddha, who practices exceptionally well and spends their whole life in a cave. But even if they stay in a cave, if they can't get along with anyone, they might not even have food to eat. Unless they are like the revered Milarepa, surviving solely on wild herbs and crystal clear water. But even that particular lifestyle is quite difficult to maintain nowadays. If one truly cannot manage their relationships with other individuals, then truly, whether it's spiritual practice or worldly matters, it will be very, very difficult. Therefore, when we study the Analects, we can clearly see the spirit of propriety, love, and benevolence everywhere. And these kinds of fundamental values, at such significant times, in fact, the profound words of the ancients truly emphasize that the relationships between people are very important indeed, whether it's relationships among relatives, between fathers and sons, or between close friends, or between husband and wife. These relationships, this intricate network of human relationships, was given great importance. So nowadays, for us as individuals, even if we don't talk about doing it for the boundless sentient beings of the world, even if it's just for our own benefit, we must handle our relationships with others very well indeed. As for human relationships, and as discussed in the Sigalovada Sutta, it mentions the 6 cardinal directions: east, south, west, north, up, and down. Please do not forget this concept. We are always the central people who are positioned in the center. Above us are our parents and relatives. I am now carefully translating this sutra into the Tibetan language. The Sigalovada Sutta will be fully translated in just a few days. I think previously it simply did not exist in the Tibetan language at all in any form. Translating it into Tibetan is still very meaningful because in Tibet, people place great importance on the teachings of the Buddhist scriptures and the instructions of the great masters of the past. It is truly a place where these are highly valued. They genuinely treat them as a kind of spiritual wealth. So I think if many people can handle their relationships in all directions, up, down, left, and right very well, then their lives should be quite happy and truly fulfilling indeed. This is very important. This is the principle discussed in this chapter. Now let's talk about chapter 14. In chapter 14, the master said, now Confucius begins. It seems that most of the time Confucius lets his disciples speak. And then he himself comes out for a while, which is quite interesting. He takes a break for a bit and then comes out again himself. The master said, this is what Confucius said. A true gentleman does not seek to eat his fill, nor does he seek comfort in his dwelling. He is content with what he has. He is quick to act, but cautious in speech. He follows the way and corrects himself. Such a person can be called truly fond of learning. Here he says, as a gentleman, one should have these qualities. Not to have excessive demands regarding food and drink at all times. In ancient times, it might have simply meant not seeking to be full, but actually, not seeking to be full truly means not being overly extravagant, especially picky, saying this food isn't good, and that food isn't good either. Some time ago, a devoted practitioner complained food in a place wasn't good and insisted on driving to another place. A while, no one knew what to do for such a devoted practitioner. Then there would be no way to stay and continue living there anymore, because every single day he would never discuss what we call sincere motivation and spiritual intention, but instead spend all day long arguing and fighting over just having one meal like this. This is really not good. Sometimes as people, we may have certain expectations for our food, and if it's not done well, we won't be satisfied either. I also care a lot about many of our public services, such as whether it's the communal dining halls or other such areas, whether it's the devoted and dedicated staff or many others, we really should take this seriously and do it well. I care a lot about this aspect, but I'm not demanding that things absolutely have to be done in a very specific and certain way. Actually, some people truly. As spiritual practitioners and cultivators, we also cannot have excessively high expectations and demands for various matters and circumstances. Just like during our first several years when we initially arrived here, we were basically living at Larung. All 3 meals were just a bit of tsampa. It was like this for 2 or 3 months at a time. This included some Han Chinese Dharma friends who came with us back then. At most, they might have had a little bit of food, but there were absolutely no vegetables. For several years, we couldn't even hear the word vegetables mentioned at all. Just like people in remote borderlands cannot hear the Buddha's name being spoken or taught. At that time, I visited the homes of many Han Chinese Dharma friends, and during these visits, I observed their living conditions. I saw that they typically had a little bit of rice, which was a staple food, and sometimes there were lots of chili peppers in bottles. After they had cooked the rice, they would then proceed to mix in a small amount of chili pepper, which is what we now commonly refer to as duban, a fermented chili bean paste that is a fundamental ingredient in many regional cuisines. This is duban chili, isn't it? You were the same? You were raised on the flavors of chili. But at that time, it was true that this was a common occurrence. Our practice was actually quite diligent. There weren't really any other distractions like cell phones or all sorts of other things. Every single day was entirely spent on intensive studying. And we certainly didn't sleep very much either. There were almost no other significant distracting factors present at all. Actually, when you're studying, it's really important to reduce distractions. Don't have too many demands when it comes to food. One thing is not to have high expectations for food. Don't be too extravagant or luxurious. And secondly, regarding your place of residence, when it comes to where you currently live, you also shouldn't demand too much comfort or excessive luxury. Wow, the decoration. The other day, I saw a Dharma friend moving house. Her room was completely filled with all kinds of different bags, all packed to the brim. You couldn't even figure out how to walk through it. Just a couple of days ago, around the apartment block, I saw another Dharma friend. I said, "Wow, you have so many things." I wondered, who knows, maybe it's all pure gold or shimmering silver inside. Even if it's a very quiet and secluded place, if there are too many messy things around, your mind might also get a bit chaotic. As practitioners, we should genuinely strive to be more frugal and live simply. I do not expect all lay people in the entire world to achieve this completely. I am certainly not demanding that. Some people in the world, for all sorts of various and understandable reasons, might still need to have certain things, but especially for those individuals residing in Buddhist institutes or within some truly pure Dharma centers, I have personally observed many dedicated practitioners in Theravada Buddhism. Even today, when I see the way they live, it's extremely simple and very pure. They don't really have much in the way of excess possessions. Apart from their 3 essential meals each day and their 3 simple robes, when I personally went to Thailand, Cambodia, and many other similar places and observed their humble dormitories, I truly felt envious of their contentment and few desires. So generally speaking, when Confucius talks about this here, he says that as a true gentleman, one should not have high demands regarding food, clothing, or housing. You shouldn't set your expectations too high. Then the third point is quick to act. When it comes to handling matters, one should not be lazy. You should be sharp and hardworking. And be very cautious and thoughtful with your words. Don't just impulsively say whatever comes to mind. In the end, what you carelessly say yourself could potentially put you in significant danger. This unfortunate situation happens to many, many people in the past when some people were expelled from our institute. In the end, it was their own actions that led to it. There were many different reasons for this. Ultimately, they also had no choice but to leave. So when we do things, we should be very diligent, serious, and hardworking. And when it comes to speaking, when it's appropriate to speak, just as it is said in the Gentleman's Code of Speech and Conduct, when it's time to speak, speak earnestly. When it's not the right time, then don't speak. We should be very mindful and exercise extreme caution regarding the overall appropriateness of our words. Then goes to those who possess the way to be corrected. That is to say, rely on those genuinely upright people who diligently follow the way. In this manner, we can effectively correct our undesirable habits. Actually, what is being said here is, as Mahayana practitioners, this is basically how we should also be as well in our daily lives. One aspect is not to be too demanding about food and clothing. Also, whether in our actions or in our motivation, we should be very earnest. We should be extremely cautious in our speech. And we should frequently rely on good teachers, those virtuous and knowledgeable teachers. So in this case, what is this called? This can be called being truly fond of learning. Here, the term fond of learning means having very modest needs in your daily life and routine, being very earnest in one's actions, having a great love for knowledge, and often enjoying the company of wise people and virtuous people, frequently being together with them. Such a person can be called fond of learning. In fact, Confucius was someone who was very fond of learning. Earlier it was also said, never tired of learning, never weary of teaching others. This was probably mentioned before as well. It is also discussed in our Analects. It is widely said that the great Confucius had another diligent student who was also very much fond of learning, named Yan Hui. Yan Hui was among his 3,000 disciples, or among the 72 distinguished ones. When others asked, among your disciples, who is the most fond of learning? He replied, oh, the one most fond of learning is Yanzi. Unfortunately, he has already passed away. He himself explicitly stated this as well. There was also a notable individual named Kong Wenzi. Kong Wenzi was also exceedingly fond of learning and acquiring knowledge. We have a saying called, not ashamed to ask those below oneself. He was not embarrassed to ask questions of those beneath him. As long as he could gain knowledge, he would seek advice from anyone. So Confucius was a person who truly loved learning very much. This kind of admirable spirit of loving to learn is also very much needed in our current era. It is still very necessary. But it is not very common at all, because nowadays, whether it is the extreme and rapid development of material things or people's particular and intense pursuit of material things, it has become a significant aspect. This is indeed the kind of era we currently live in. It is widely said that in the past nearly 100 years, in many places, poets and literary figures have basically not emerged. Even Buddhist scholars have basically not appeared at all in any form. What is the reason for this? Why can't people today write poetry? Why can't people nowadays create genuine literature and literary works? Why is this happening? Perhaps it's because most of us are not eager to learn and study, and most people have been contaminated and polluted by material desires and the 5 sensory pleasures and 6 worldly dusts. They are deeply immersed in these cultural phenomena all day long, and as a direct result of this constant exposure, many of us may have truly and profoundly absorbed a vast array of influences. A significant number of young people nowadays basically spend every single day from dawn till dusk completely immersed in all kinds of popular and niche cultural expressions. Or you could say in all sorts of useless information, just being caught up in all of these things. Some young people nowadays, many individuals borrow money and take out high-interest loans every single day, let alone learning anything new or acquiring valuable skills. Even for themselves, they might not be able to fully pay it back in their entire lifetime, which is a truly concerning situation. Nowadays, there are so many of these things online, and once you enter and get involved, there's no way out. Currently, some young people are engaging with completely valueless content. There's something called two-dimensional culture or anime culture that has no meaningful substance whatsoever. Like anime and various manga comics, these have been transformed into some form of art. Whatever products and creations they produce, in our Buddhist logic and reasoning system, there is a concept called pervasion or universal application. Their peripheral merchandise, including various related products and accessories, all of these items are also widely sold online. Furthermore, many businesses, especially in the current market, particularly love to craft and strategically launch all kinds of engaging advertisements, so that these young people who possess very little social experience, and actually, in reality, many college students right after graduation don't have much money. They don't really have any salary or anything like that. But just for the sake of acquiring so-called unique collectibles or highly sought-after limited editions, they possess a very extensive and diverse range of collections. What are these things they collect? All the things they collect look just like children's animated cartoons, and they meticulously analyze what kind of distinct personalities these characters possess, what exactly their specific roles are, and every single day they live within this kind of virtual world. For people of my particular age group, it's a very different experience. We don't really know what this world is like. Actually, in the current world and mindset of many young people nowadays, don't even mention or think about serving and benefiting all sentient beings or working dedicatedly for the welfare of all the people under heaven. Not to mention having any ideals in that regard. They are simply completely immersed in a truly captivating virtual world that's especially incredibly hard to genuinely escape from, almost like being addicted to drugs. In the end, they become addicted themselves and have no choice but to keep going in, spending a lot of money. If their family doesn't give them money, they start taking out loans online, and eventually, nowadays, there are all kinds of debt collection systems and organizations that are also very powerful. Every country has them. So in the end, their whole life, actually many young people nowadays are truly having a hard time. Some of them are now using drugs, and drug addiction is especially terrifying. I've also visited some rehab centers and prisons, and as long as someone tries it even once as a joke, or simply out of sheer curiosity, they can never truly quit for the entire rest of their life, you see. Once they're addicted, and this kind of addiction goes deep into their bones, so there's nothing that can be done. This isn't something we can overcome just by mindset. It needs to be addressed physiologically, unless your body has completely let go of it. For most people, drug addiction is impossible to quit. That's one aspect of it. And now the addiction to the internet is the same. It doesn't help when parents say something or when teachers say something. Parents are especially distressed. Our child is about to go crazy. What should we do? They don't show themselves all day long, spending the whole day watching online games. There's absolutely nothing that can be done to counteract it. It's a pervasive kind of mental poison. This insidious mental toxin is very much like the stimulating effects of caffeine, as it eventually stimulates the nervous system in the human brain. And it ultimately ends up severely damaging our delicate nervous system. So in this particular kind of modern era, a genuine and profound true love of learning, which is so essential for personal growth and intellectual development, is really not easy to find. But we still very sincerely hope that we should diligently study and work hard and apply ourselves. For example, in the biographies of eminent monks, there was Master Huiyuan in the past. Actually, the story of Master Huiyuan is quite deeply touching and truly inspiring. Master Huiyuan, the first patriarch of the Pure Land School, his esteemed teacher was the venerable Chan Master Daoan. When he formally took him on as a devoted disciple, Huiyuan was, in fact, still very young in age. But Master Huiyuan, in front of his teacher, listened to the Dharma for 3 years. In the very end, his wisdom became truly very mature. Moreover, he was willing to practice asceticism, living a particularly simple life. But he was very especially diligent in the Dharma, practicing truly in purity and diligently. In the end, he ultimately received and fully absorbed all of the profound and insightful teachings of the esteemed Chan Master Dawan. When he was about 24 years old, he relied on his own strength to expound on the true nature of prajna. Sometimes he would even use the teachings of Zhuangzi to explain things. At that time, he was very famous. Later, Chan Master Dawan also said, "My dear Huiyuan, in the future world, my profound teachings will undoubtedly spread widely and extensively throughout the entire country, reaching every corner and every heart." He said, "The only hope lies with Huiyuan." Indeed, it was thanks to his significant efforts that many profound Buddhist teachings, primarily focused on promoting the Pure Land Dharma, were widely spread. Actually, if a person in the process of studying and learning is not controlled by these distracting factors, I also truly and sincerely hope that all of us, regardless of whether you are a layperson or ordained, in the very process of seeking further knowledge, should not set too high demands for your lifestyle. Basically, being able to live a truly simple and uncomplicated life is very good indeed. And as for your mind, don't let there be too many other various disturbances and entanglements. Otherwise, ordinary people are easily influenced, and your own conduct should be kept pure, so that in the future, the knowledge you acquire will be beneficial to sentient beings, and it will also be beneficial to yourself. So my suggestion is, even though the Analects is a work of traditional culture, there is still a great deal of profound and valuable knowledge truly in it. I've also been reading some of it recently, although my time is still quite limited indeed, and honestly, it's a bit hard to squeeze it in. But I have about 20 different editions of the Analects here, different versions of the ancient and revered Analects, and I also, in addition to that, do indeed have not read all of them. But roughly, for example, the content we're discussing today, I check each part in every version, and it always feels quite meaningful. I personally enjoy reading books. I hope that many of us, at the very least, can read 1 or 2 books. If you want to learn, it might be a little bit more interesting if you really actually read a little bit. Let me show you a few of the books I used as references. This is Qian Mu, a master of Chinese studies, and his commentary on the Analects. He wrote it at Yale University. It is said that when he first arrived in the US, he didn't know English, and it was hard for him to pass the time there, so he wrote this book. At first, it was originally written in the vernacular Chinese language, and later on, it was meticulously turned into classical Chinese prose. There's also Master Wuyi's work, which meticulously studies the Analects from a distinctly Buddhist perspective. The content presented is rather traditional in its approach. This one is by layman Li Bingnan, who explained it word by word and sentence by sentence. He also cited teachings from the 4 books and 5 classics. There's also Nan Huaichin's alternative interpretations of the Analects. His explanations are quite detailed and thorough. There's also The Wisdom of Confucius, a significant work, and other important books like An Explanation of the Analects, among others. I don't have enough time here to discuss them all, but at the very least, it's good to refer to 1 or 2 books. Okay, goodbye. This is to prevent you all from falling asleep and dozing off during the lecture. It shouldn't happen, right? Next, we will discuss and go through Chapter 15 together. It would be best if we could finish it completely today, though it might run a little over time. So, what exactly does Chapter 15 of the text say? Now, the character, Zigong, appears. He says this very important statement. To be poor without being obsequious, and to be rich without being arrogant. How about that? He said, if you're poor, it's best not to be obsequious, because generally, when someone is poor, they might engage in all sorts of illegal behaviors, or do things that are not proper. So for a poor person, isn't it best not to be obsequious? And then for someone who is wealthy and noble, generally speaking, they tend to be arrogant and proud. No arrogance, not being arrogant. Wouldn't that be very good? At that particular time, Zigong respectfully asked Confucius, I think poor people and wealthy people should be like this. Wouldn't that be very good? Confucius said, that would do. Confucius said, yes, that's fine. That is also good. But he didn't particularly affirm it. He didn't say, wow, that's excellent. He didn't say that. Why is that? The following explains. Not as good as being poor yet joyful or wealthy yet loving propriety. That was indeed his answer. Of course, that is perfectly acceptable too. But if one does not truly have being poor yet delighting in the way, then what happens? Even though one is poor, they enjoy and are joyful.
In some versions, it says delighting in the way. Perhaps delighting in the way is a bit better. We often talk about being content in poverty and delighting in the way. Of course, what you just mentioned is that a wealthy person is not arrogant and a poor person is not obsequious. Of course, that's also very good. But still, it can't compare to what? It can't compare to a poor person who not only isn't obsequious, but also makes progress on that basis and delights in the way, who loves the goodness and beauty of the way. This is considered truly excellent. And then for a wealthy person, not only is he not arrogant, but on top of that, he also understands propriety and rules. As a wealthy person, even if he isn't arrogant, if he doesn't understand anything, is dull, and only has money, if he has nothing except money, even if he's not arrogant, that's still not good enough. He still needs to understand the rules. Wouldn't that be even better, perhaps, for everyone? He said, compared to this, that's very good. Then Zigong said to him, there's a certain line in the ancient book of songs that's Jing, like cutting and filing, like carving and polishing. I have understood your deeper meaning, Confucius. Actually, what you are talking about is just like a line from the book of songs which says, like cutting and filing, like carving and polishing. Isn't this the same principle? We need to learn step by step to cultivate ourselves in stages. What does this mean exactly? When we explain this passage here, there are different interpretations. The term ruchi refers to the meaning of cutting or carving here, cutting. Some explanations say it is parallel. For example, with some bones, you cut them precisely. For ivory, it's filing, a delicate process. For jade, it's carving, requiring great skill. And for stone, it's polishing to achieve a smooth finish. He uses different materials, each with its unique demands and techniques, and relies on these established methods to refine them. This particular kind of approach is different for each one. What he means to say is that whether people are poor or wealthy and prosperous, different individuals possess their own distinct merits and virtues, different practices, different ways of learning. This is also very good. That's one layer of meaning. There's another layer of meaning. For example, when working with jade, first at the very beginning, you need to cut. Originally, it's just a large stone block, so he uses cutting techniques to create the general basic shape and form. Then comes filing. For filing, you use a file to proceed with the process. Maybe its head, its body, its legs, and its hands. You know, for example, these gradually start to truly take shape. This process is called filing. Then for carving, you meticulously use the very finest tools, including the eyes, the mouth, and all the intricate facial features. Everything is expertly carved in great detail. This is called carving. After everything is finished and finalized, you then start to polish it. So in a certain sense, it's very much like a wealthy individual who, at first, is not arrogant or conceited, and then gradually learns proper manners and refined etiquette, gradually progressing step by step like this. That is truly a good and noble person. The poor person at first is not obsequious either. So what exactly does he truly understand about this? He understands that on this foundation, he can begin to find joy in the way. Step by step, it's in Buddhism, where you first talk about the common preliminary practices, then the uncommon. And when it comes to Vajrayana, there are also uncommon and common preliminary practices. Finally, you reach the main practice. As for the main practice, it is the true form of practice. At the very beginning of this kind of practice, we might not be able to create or make it ourselves very soon, but actually, as long as you have clear goals and a vision, it is indeed possible to achieve. In the past, it should have been in Italy, I believe. Italy has a famous sculpture called David. This David sculpture is also very well known and renowned worldwide. You have probably heard of it before, right? In the past, there was an artist named Michelangelo. He was indeed the talented sculptor who skillfully crafted it. He actually made it when he was 26 years old, I think. At that time, in the courtyard of a church, there was a large stone block that had been there for over 20 years. They thought it was quite an eyesore and wondered what to do with it, and whether there was a skilled sculptor who could truly make something remarkable out of it. Later, it was widely said that Michelangelo, the renowned artist, when he was still quite young, in his early 20s, sculpted it into the famous David. Speaking of David, there is actually a very important and significant story about him in the Old Testament biblical scriptures. In their religious tradition and biblical faith, he was truly considered a very great and mighty warrior hero. This was approximately around 1010 BC or thereabouts. When we actually visited Jerusalem, there were actually many different stories about David told everywhere throughout the city. Of course, his classical artistic representation and sculptural image is traditionally depicted as nude. You don't need to look at screen. I don't have this particular photograph to show you here. Actually, when we're speaking from a Western cultural and artistic perspective, like especially during the Renaissance, there were many sculptures, particularly those with profound cultural significance, that also appeared remarkably lifelike. Of course, perhaps for those individuals who diligently follow Confucian thought, and indeed some people who deeply study Confucian culture, are relatively conservative, or you could say they truly follow established tradition. Whenever they happen to encounter some Western sculptures, they often find them to be especially rare and quite hard to fully accept. When it comes to taking photos, they don't dare to take pictures at all. This includes going to Bhutan. Bhutan also has some similar images, various different sculptures. This also includes the Tibetan Buddhism. There are some particular Buddha statues in certain temples which actually carry some religious significance and also have a certain cultural meaning. But if someone grows up within that particular culture, they simply wouldn't feel that this is either something strange or something that would cause them any affliction or lead to any wrong views. They absolutely wouldn't think that way. When you go to Bhutan, the Bhutanese people see these symbolic and meaningful images as something completely natural and inherently familiar to them. And then when you go to various Western countries, you will find that in many educational schools, public libraries, and cultural museums, you'll find all kinds of statues, including those of the Virgin Mary. People all see these things as it is something that is considered completely natural, righteous, and absolutely taken for granted as a matter of course. But perhaps each of us grows up in a completely different environment. In some specific places, now because of the influence of Western culture, people tend to be more open-minded. So there might be a bit of that. But actually, it's not really a question of being open-minded or not. In fact, when it comes to our very own bodies, in the West, much of the beauty of the human form is often regarded as truly a form of art. And whether they are sculptors or painters, when they meticulously create these magnificent statues or make these images, they are drawn by a certain cultural attraction. Earlier, I mentioned the magnificent statue of David. In Italy, this iconic masterpiece is typically about 3 to 4 meters tall. But this particular kind of statue, these magnificent statues have now existed for a remarkable 400 or 500 years. But every discerning painter or artist, when they truly see it, the first thing it brings them is a sense of culture. And what else does it bring? It brings them a profound sense of wisdom. But for some of us, it's a very different experience. The first reaction after seeing it might be to feel troubled. Just like I mentioned yesterday, some people, when they see shrimp, immediately think about how to eat them, that kind of thing. So some of us really do have this kind of mindset, which is especially rigid. And sometimes this rigidity is extremely selfish. They never even consider some of the deeper aspects, profound and hidden meanings behind it. They only think about things related to their own desires and to greed, anger, and ignorance. So in these particular respects, I think there's really no significant need to over-explain this remarkable sculpture. Actually, sometimes we as people should simply understand and appreciate the significance of many religions and cultures in this world. If we do that, it might actually be quite interesting. So that's actually what he really talked about. Like cutting and polishing, like carving and grinding. Isn't that what it means? He said, isn't that precisely what this particular statement refers to? Zigong then said, what you have just expressed should indeed mean that things should be done step by step in proper order. Is that precisely what you mean? Then Confucius thoughtfully said, yes, Zigong. Zigong, you are indeed very clever. Zigong, you are truly, truly impressive indeed. Even before I said it, you already understood. You truly are a very sharp-minded person, a truly good disciple. Confucius was pleased because he basically understood the full meaning of the situation. He said, now I can discuss the Book of Songs with you. He said, now at this moment I can certainly teach you the Book of Songs. As for the Book of Songs, at that time it represented the highest level in Confucian studies. You don't even need to practice the preliminary stages. I can go straight to teaching you the very main and most important practice immediately. By telling you about the past, you can understand the future. If I tell you about some of the sequential methods from the past, you will certainly understand. Then you can directly understand things that will happen in the future. You can truly infer many significant things from just one single example. You truly are exceptionally sharp-minded. That's absolutely excellent. At that particular time, Confucius held a very, very high opinion of Zigong indeed. He had a certain level of insight. Because when it comes to the Book of Songs, some scholars, when interpreting it, it's not just the ordinary poetry we talk about. There are very deep and profound implications hidden within it. It truly represents a state of high-level insight. So at that time, Confucius wanted to pass on something to him, saying, "Now I can teach you the highest and most profound secret technique. Could you please tell me a secret technique, if you don't mind?" I said, "What?" "Just a profound secret technique." Some of them began to look around here and there, eagerly asking me, "Could you possibly tell me a secret technique?" So Confucius said, "All right, I will indeed tell you a very special secret technique." Now the very last one, number 16, this is chapter 16. Chapter 15 has already been thoroughly discussed and covered. The final chapter, chapter 16. Chapter 16 in the end is still spoken by Confucius. Do not worry that others do not truly know you. Instead, worry that you do not genuinely and deeply understand others. Worry here means to be concerned or anxious. We shouldn't be concerned that others don't know us. It's perfectly fine if others don't know me. Nowadays, many people say, why don't you understand me? Why don't you know me? You're being irresponsible towards me. How can you not know me? According to Confucius. It's actually a good thing if others don't know you. Whether it's Confucius, Shunzi, or anyone else, if others don't know you, this is actually a state of spiritual cultivation. It's best if people don't know you, but you can't be ignorant of others. You should understand others. Why should you understand others? There are benefits for oneself and for others. If it's for your own benefit, when others don't know you, you can benefit yourself. If it's for the benefit of others, I need to know what's in their hearts. If I want to benefit all beings, then you must truly understand people's hearts. You may indeed know a person's outward face, but not their inner heart. If we only know about others superficially and just think to ourselves, "Oh, so that's exactly what they're really like," but in the end we don't truly understand them, then there's no way you can really help them. So in this respect, his view is actually quite different from many of our current ideas. There really is a bit of a difference. What is it like now? Nowadays, many people think, "It's fine if I don't know about others. I really don't care. I don't need to know what's in other people's hearts. What does it have to do with me? But others must understand me. In order for others to know me, I might pay a significant price." Including now, in this digital age, on the internet, many individuals are actively self-promoting, diligently making their own compelling videos, just because they want others to know about them. Whether it's in our daily lives, for example, nowadays some disciples often say to their spiritual teachers that, "You must surely know me. If you truly don't know me, that means you don't really consider me your devoted and loyal disciple. Did you completely and utterly forget about me? If you have truly forgotten, then I will not acknowledge you as my spiritual teacher." There are indeed people like this. But if we look at Confucius' true philosophy, there is actually a profound meaning here. For most of us, we insist that others must know us, understand us, care about us, protect and safeguard us, and truly help us. We genuinely want others to revolve completely around us and our needs. This is my demand. My biggest and most significant demand is that you absolutely must give to me, truly care about me, genuinely praise me, and diligently do all sorts of wonderful things for me. Many people around us, you must completely revolve around me. But as for myself, am I really truly good to others? Do I really care about others? Often the answer is no. So in the Sakya aphorisms, it is clearly said that one must always strive to truly benefit others. If you do not benefit others, there's no real difference between you and an animal. If someone in their daily life never thinks about benefiting or helping others in any way, then such a person's behavior is truly just like that of livestock and animals, only constantly seeking and pursuing their own personal food and drink and sustenance, which is really no different from what even ordinary livestock and animals are perfectly capable of doing. If you have no intention to help others and spend your days just eating, drinking, and having fun without any sense of values, then there isn't much difference between us and animals. So, as was mentioned earlier in the ancient and profound Book of Rites, if a person truly lacks proper etiquette, then there is a specific kind of animal, famously called the elk, This particular elk, for example, is often cited as having absolutely no inherent sense of ethics whatsoever. Even relationships like father and son can be mixed with the mother. They live in this kind of way. So as human beings, we should inherently possess a profound sense of proper etiquette. And this essential sense of etiquette should always be fundamentally based upon genuinely benefiting others. Here, on the surface, it initially seems to clearly state, if others don't know me, I don't worry about it. But what do I worry about? That I don't know others. This statement is actually very important. I think among the things we've discussed today, one is worrying about not knowing others. Even if we can't remember anything else, remember worrying about not knowing others. I worry, I am concerned that I do not know others, that I am not attentive to others. For example, if I am a person in charge, have I cared for everyone around me, everyone who is connected to me? From my perspective, in this regard, caring for others is very important. Whether others care about me or not, that is not so important. But in our actual current daily lives, there are still some differences. So at the very beginning, if other people do not fully understand me and I do not feel any resentment at all, am I not truly a gentleman? As mentioned earlier, if others do not understand me, I do not feel pain. If I am to be a gentleman, it doesn't matter if others misunderstand. But I cannot fail to understand others. I must truly understand others, and I must genuinely care about others. Actually, in some traditional Confucian thought, it is believed that, is there an altruistic mindset? It's not like in the way of the Bodhisattva, as it is just described there. It doesn't explicitly state how to benefit all sentient beings. But when it comes to caring for those around us, there is much that we can really learn from it, or that is worth remembering. There is a culture of genuinely caring for others, and as for this kind of culture, it is indeed truly remarkable. Sometimes we can also reflect on it from another perspective. If we take the time to understand it well, it can eliminate and remove many different afflictions from our hearts and minds. In the classical Buddhist text called the Sadharmas Martyu Pastana Sutra, there is a profound saying that goes, "A person who enjoys wealth and pleasure without becoming attached or indulgent is a wise person." It says that if a person truly enjoys a certain significant amount of wealth and profound happiness, and after experiencing this wealth and happiness does not become careless and often cares for others, then this is a truly wise person. And if we are not like this, then often we really base our own happiness on others, very much so. We ourselves will also be very miserable. In fact, everyone should create their own personal happiness and contentment. If my happiness must be built upon others, then as soon as there is just any change in others, my happiness will truly collapse. It's just like trying to build a structure on ice. That would be scary. If my personal happiness and joy is built upon my own body and mind instead, then I myself can maintain complete autonomy and control, and I shouldn't need to worry about it at all. So we definitely still need to use a kind of profound wisdom and understanding to properly deal with this situation. So what is being discussed here? The Jue chapter has a total of 16 sections. Today we have finished discussing them.
Bandara